Okay, so this is my mother, Jane Ann Ferguson.
Hello.
First off, do I have your permission to record you?
Yes.
Okay, so can you start off by telling us a little bit about where your family is from and how you grew up?
Yes. So I grew up in the Midwest in Indiana, Terre Haute, Indiana, and my family predominantly from Indianapolis and a small town called Lynn, Indiana, which is a farming community in Indiana.
Great. Okay, so how many generations of your family live in the US or have lived in the
Oh
US?
my gosh. Okay, my dad traced back our lineage. I mean, he got back to be right after the Revolutionary War. And I think it went all the way back, traced back to Baltimore, Maryland. And he actually went on Ancestry and got somebody to do all this research and found this person, Christopher Muchner, which my maiden name is Muchner, which is very German, but they traced all the way back that lineage. And so we have all of the records, and he even found pictures of these people, and he got them made, and they're hanging on the wall at my parents' house in Indiana. So it's kind of neat.
So, are there any like specific traditions or religious celebrations that you celebrated or your grandparents celebrated that you've made it a point to pass down and that you did and your grandparents did and that now you're passing on down to
Right.
us?
Well, let's see. Christmas was always a big deal in our house. And so, what I remember doing growing up is on Christmas Eve, we always opened presents. So, we went to Christmas Eve service and then we opened presents that night. And the reason we did that was we lived in Terre Haute, Indiana growing up, and it's about an hour and a half from Indianapolis. And that's where my mother's parents were. And then my dad's parents were another hour and a half north in a farming community. So we would do Christmas presents, Christmas Eve, go to bed, get up, go to Indianapolis, do one Christmas, and then get up and go to the other Christmas up in northern Indiana on a farm. And so we did that my whole life growing up. And so that was kind of our tradition.
Okay, so do you have any stories or family conflicts, maybe, or just stories in general involving ethnicity or race that you've remembered growing up?
So I do remember my dad was a college basketball coach for 35 years at an engineering college in Indiana. That was a very academic engineering school, and he was a basketball coach. And so he took his teams to play all over. And this happened in the 60s. His team, and they were predominantly a white team, white basketball players, and they did have a black player on their team. And they were down, I think, around Memphis, and again, it was in the 60s. And so he wanted to take them for a pregame meal. And so they went to this diner, and they all walked in, and they said, well, you guys welcome, but that one, pointing to the black player, he has to eat on the back porch with the people that work in the kitchen. And so my dad, was appalled by this and couldn't believe it and felt so bad that his player heard this. And so anyway, he told the guy, well, no, then none of us are eating here, of course. And so they left and went to somebody else that was a more reasonable place, which I don't know how much that was available in Memphis, but they, I remember hearing that story for sure. And that was crazy.
And I've heard that story. And
Yeah,
even when I was younger, I remember hearing that story and being so confused as to how that could even ever happen.
right.
Um, okay, so what about moving more towards gender roles and expectations? Was there anything that you noticed growing up, either between your brother or you or my
Yeah.
uncle?
So my brother and I'm 2 years older, and so anytime there were, like I said, my dad was a basketball coach and a home builder, and he'd been in, he was in the army, previous, and so growing up, we were always, he'd give us chores to do around the house. So we lived on kind of a big property, and he would say, okay, somebody needs to mow the grass, you need to weed, you need to like move the lumber or go gather wood for the fire or whatever. But Jane Ann, me, John can do that. Your brother can do that if you can make me a pie. If you make me a pie, then you can get out of doing that labor, and that's more appropriate for you. And so I became a really, really, really good baker. And to this day, I am a good pie maker because, but my dad would never, like, when I think back, like, he would never have said, hey, Jane Ann, go get some wood. Your brother's going to make me a pie. Like, that would not even be in his stream of consciousness at all. And actually, my brother's a really good cook also. So, anyway.
So with Grandpa, was his mom like that? Like, she was very, like, took on the woman role and, like, cooked and cleaned and everything, and was his dad like that?
I mean, I think everybody was like that.
Right?
Yeah. So, but I will say, he grew up in a farming community, but his mother was a teacher and taught third grade. And they got married in 1928. But she went to college, and she was one of the first females that they knew around anywhere that went to college. In that time. And so she was a very, very strong woman. She always worked and always taught, and then his dad was a farmer. So, but I mean, gender roles are what they are. I mean, I don't think she would have aspired, like, women, they were teachers or nurses or homemakers. So that's kind of the opportunities that were around then. And now, it's so much different.
Right. So, last question. Growing up or now, do you feel like you've taken on any influence from other cultures in your lifestyle, or while you were growing up, did Grandpa or Meemaw ever feel like they thought that was important, or did y'all travel and take on different traditions that y'all learned about?
Yeah. Well, my mom is predominantly English kind of background. And then my dad is German. And so we went to Europe a few times when I was growing up, and we always did a lot of, went to the Hofbrauhaus in Munich, and we did all the touristy German things. But I think that was very, very important to my dad for us to know, like, where we'd come from. So we came from Germany, and then we went to England and kind of followed where my mom and dad, my grandparents on my mom's side were from that lineage. And so, that's been very important. In fact, I remember going and buying a traditional German dress called a dirndl. That was like the little, like, think of the St. Pauli girl outfit kind of. And then my dad had lederhosen. And so, and learning to bake, noodles and kind of heavy German food, schnitzel, bratwurst, knockwurst, that kind of thing was kind of important. And my dad always loved, he called it Oompa music, which is like the music that you hear, like roll out the barrel, fun, that kind of like polka music from Germany. That really reminded him he was stationed in Germany when he was in the army, and so he loved all that, and couldn't wait to show his family that. And even to this day, if there's an Oktoberfest anywhere in the around where they live, they go. And they just celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary, and they're both almost 90, and they're doing great. And so it's really fun to kind of pick their brain about all this stuff.
I remember being in 5th grade, and Peepaw was quizzing me on different German words.
Right.
And the umlaut, he asked me if I knew what the 2 dots above the letters was, and I said, that's an umlaut. And he was so happy that I knew what that was.
Right, because Muchner, I think, his ancestors came across and went into Ellis Island, and it was probably Münchner was really the name, Munchnер with an umlaut over the U. It actually means a man from Munich. And so, who knows if that was changed at Ellis Island. The umlaut went by the wayside. They put a T instead of an N. Those things kind of happen, but there really are only like 2 other Muchners in the whole United States with it spelled that way. So interesting.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
All right. Happy to help.